Again, I'm going early because I wanted to tell you a thing. The entirety of the tsunami of my social media that blasts into my face every single day, it's almost all exclusively dominated by the discourse around a particular video game. And I can't say for certain that this video game is good or not good or bad or wrong. I didn't make the video game. I can't comment to its construction, to its appearance, to its sales. Not my arena. I will tell you this. I also can't tell you whether or not you should play it or stream it or watch streams of it or enjoy it or like it, because I don't have the ability to do that for you. That's not my thing. You get to make your own decisions, and I have to trust you to make them the same way I get to make my decisions, and you have to trust me on them. But I'll tell you this. There is an entire community of people just like you and me, groups of people who are frequent subject to harm, persecution, prosecution, violence, threats, mistreatment, misapprehension, bigotry, intolerance, words and actions that cause them upset, stress, damage, injury. And they are harmed not by the existence of a video game, because it's just a product. We live in a capitalist society. There's going to be products all over the place. They're harmed by the ideology and the philosophy broadcast by the IP holder who put this game into motion. They're harmed by the ideology. They're harmed by the thoughts. They're not harmed by the game. No one gives a shit if you press circle and do a thing or you press R2 and do a thing. They're harmed by the thinking that sits underneath it. Now, you might not think twice about that. You might not think twice about that at all because, what do you care? You're going to play a game. But understand that your decisions, your thoughts, whether or not you laugh about this on social media, whether or not you say and call other people names for things or threaten other people, those things have consequences. Those things have reactions. Those things leave an impact on people. And there's a group of people who are harmed by the material in and around this product. If you genuinely don't care because you're out to do your thing, get done what you want to get done, okay. But understand that indifference, that ignorance, that avoidance, that cowardice leads to perpetuating this harm other people suffer. And your lack of compassion is noticeable and immature and unnecessary. I don't care whether you play a video game. I'm going to tell you right now, this evening when I'm done this, I am going to go play a completely different game because I'll need to unwind from this because it's pretty stressful to do what I do. But I'm not going to play that game because the material underneath that game hurts people I care about. So I'm not going to do it because I don't want to be a person who's contributing to something that harms or upsets other people. I want things to be cool for everybody. That's just something to think about before we get started. Let's go.
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
The fuck is that?
Hey, yo.
Well, here we are again, right? Here we are doing our thing. We're back for yet another writer's chat. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing okay. Yeah, I hope you're doing okay. It's been a day. I did manage a haircut, so that's nice. If you weren't here for the Monday night romance stream, this is the first time you're seeing it. I'm very pleased with it. So I hope you and yours are doing well wherever you might be. This is the Writer's Chat for February I want to make sure I get the date right. February 8th. I know it has the date on the top of this thing, but yeah, I wanted to make sure I got the date right. It's been one of those days. So welcome to the Writer's Chat. I am John, and it is my job to help you write better. It's nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Good to be here. If you've never been here before, here's how this works. I collect questions from all across social media. Big things, little things, small things about writing and editing and publishing and marketing and everything creative in between. And I spend 90 minutes to 2 hours doing my best to give answers to these questions and make it available to you over there. Now, if you're here watching this on Twitch, on YouTube, you can jump in chat anytime and ask all the questions you want. I'd be happy to answer them. It'd be great. If you're watching this the day after over on YouTube, you can leave those questions down in the comments, and I will get to them. If you're listening to this on the podcast feed, I keep pointing like you're seeing this, but there's another machine over there. If you're listening to this, I unfortunately can't answer your questions if you're just going to yell them out loud. So come find me on social media. Awesome_John or Awesome John in most places. You can certainly find me. With that said, let's do a regular intro, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, planners, plotters, exercise enthusiasts, thumb wrestlers, dance pole builders, contractors, anybody who's ever had to fix a light last minute, hairstylists, butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, soap lovers, shower takers, bathers, anybody who knows how to really get a drawstring back into a pair of sweatpants, anybody who's ever pulled a thing out of their freezer and wondered how the hell they're going to make it into dinner and then they make it into a meal, and most importantly, the comrades. Welcome. It's really good to see you. Yes, haircut. Finally achieved. There's very little hair. It's really just here, and it's amazing. Although I was never prepared for how cold the rest of my head gets. I spend a lot of my time wearing a hat or pulling this hood up like a Jedi. So that's cool. But yes, haircut accomplished. I feel like a regular person. Go me. I'm also trying to grow some kind of beard to see what's up. But yeah, neither here nor there. Let's answer some questions. That's what we're here for today. Oh, tea. Let's do the tea. I should make a tea graphic, shouldn't I? The tea update. I've got 1 cup of the Neighbor's Lipton because I've got to use it. And I've got 1 very large icy pint glass of a Russian tea that I've never had before. That's looks okay. I figured about the halfway point in tonight's stream, I'll be through these cups and I'll be into that one. The cup date. Oh God, that's so good. A cup date. We're going to write that down. Hell yes. Where's my cup? That's good. Oh man. They should pay you to come up with things for a living. That's genius. Cup date. Fuck yes. So good. I know I immediately swore and YouTube will never monetize, although, I'm so under the I got an email saying that I had I had been viewed some 500 hours or something, and to me that's enormous. No, it wasn't 500 hours. I'm sorry. It was 350 hours. And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's incredible. 350 on my way to 500." And then I look at the requirements for YouTube monetization, and I have 1/10 the subscribers and nowhere near the hours watched. I'm getting there, but it's real slow. And I was so discouraged this morning. Just, sucked the wind right out of those sails, But on we march all the same. If you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, thank you so much. Please like and subscribe and click the bell notification because that pleases the algorithm. All hail the algorithm. And it's nice. I appreciate it if you do that. Thank you. Let's answer some questions, shall we? While I get a mouthful of tea right away. I've been talking all day. I probably should have prefaced like the entirety of everything with, I've been talking pretty much nonstop for like 7 hours. So this is going to go great. Question number 1. Why is so much writing advice recycled? All right, so I've been talking about this over on the podcast feed, which is John Helps You Write Better wherever your pods are casted. Writing advice tends to get recycled because it's really hard to give advice. And sometimes people grab for the easy stuff rather than sit down and explain the more crunchy material specific bits, right? It's easier to tell you, hey, don't give up, keep going, you're doing great, buddy. It's easier to say that than say, okay, what you're going to want to do to create a plot twist is make sure that your rising action is creating a new context by generalizing 2 different options between the possibility A and possibility B when it comes to what's happening post-twist. That's really complicated. That's not easily fittable inside like a real quick blog post or a very simple tweet. And most commonly, your sources of writing advice are high-speed drivel shot into your face via hashtags. So writing advice gets recycled because people tend to, while they do tend to ask the same sort of questions over and over and over again, rather than give thoughtful, considered answers, because A, that takes time, and B, that requires some training. It's just easier to rehash the same talking points. Oh, golly gee, just keep going is not actually fundamentally helpful to somebody who's like, hey, why isn't my query working? But the nuance is stripped out in most social media, and what you're left with is a situation where you have a lot of people repeating the same material, but nobody's really making substantial progress. That's the situation we find ourselves in the advice sphere. Can we say that? Can we call it that? Is that a thing? The advice sphere? The solution, by the way, is for more people to stop and give thoughtful answers when possible, as opposed to just saying, Google it. It's not my job to teach you. Yeah, it really is your job to teach them. And you should go out of your way to make sure everybody understands what you're talking about. But writing advice is recycled because it's easier. Side note, a lot of the people hashing out that advice don't have the background. They just like the attention. Shall we move on to the second question? Let's. That was secretly spicy. Second question. Is a first-person opening more engaging than a third-person opening? Now, I could have sworn I've answered this question in a recent chat. Like, I am pretty confident that if you dig back like 3 or 4 chats, all available, by the way, on the YouTube channel, I've answered this. But let's go over it one more time. A first-person opening is not automatically and by default more engaging than third person just because first person uses I and we as its dominant pronouns, and third person uses third person, usually gendered pronouns. One is not automatically better than the other just by the dint of its existence. First person's first person, third person's third person, second person is second person. That's okay. They can all be things. So is one better than the other? It depends on what it does in the story. If you're writing a first person story, then yeah, a first person opening is going to be better than if you suddenly shift tense and, do it in third person. What's going to serve your story best? Do that. Don't assume that there is one best way to write a thing, whatever your thing is, just because you're writing a thing. Let's say you're writing detective fiction. Detective fiction tends to be in first person. You can write detective fiction in third person. Who's going to stop you? It's your thing. Write it all you want. Write it however you want. Find the most engaging opening for your work, whatever it is, independent of the overall concept that one thing is better than the other. Like there's some great video game meta that you have to observe. Just write the opening that grabs reader attention and sets expectation and teaches the reader how to start the story, and you'll go from there. Great question. Love that question. Good luck with your opening. Question 3. Ooh, we're getting crunchy, so we're going to have another mouthful of tea. Ooh, we're getting crunchy. I can also tell you that at some point, somebody somewhere is rolling their eyes having read this graphic, which says question number 3, how do I close the loops in my story without turning to a cliffhanger to create a hook for the next book? This is a great question, except that it's also not a great question because really it's 2 questions. But that's fine. We'll answer them both. It's cool. We're going to split it at the word story and then address the back half of the question for a second, but we're going to talk about how to close the loops in your story first, because that's going to be really specific to what you're writing. If you're writing a thing with a ton of loops, then you have to engage in the narrative actions and in the scene constructions necessary to wrap things up. If you've written a romance, you got to make sure that romance hits its mark and gets where you want it to go. If you've got to write action beats, you got to make sure the action beat has resolved. You got to do the thing or the things that the story needs done. Check. Close the loops, write more scenes. However, here we're going to come to the back half of the question where we're not going to necessarily dive deep, but we are going to take this thing apart without turning to a cliffhanger. Okay, you can close the elements of your story. You can wrap things up. Your action beats can conclude. Your romance can wrap up. Your bad guy can be defeated. You can do whatever the hell your bunch of nerds can win the boat race to save the day. You can keep the malt shop open by winning the drag race at Devil's Backbone. You can defeat the evil band at the dance off. Whatever. You can do whatever the story says. You can win the prize at the fair. Whatever. You don't need a cliffhanger. Now, my first instinct is that if you're immediately reaching for a cliffhanger, you don't have a terribly strong sense of what the things and elements in your story can be, and that you've got to grab for this thing that just by its structure is going to force a level of interaction, because a cliffhanger manufactures a level of tension, right? It's this idea that like, oh man, here's this dangerous thing that's roughly coming out of the blue and holding us in this position and sustaining this tension. Oh no. That's shitty. That's just shitty. If you have to reach to a cliffhanger in order to make sure that you're engaging the reader, you have failed to engage the reader. It's sort of like saying, gosh, I want to make sure my house is clean. I'm going to burn it down. Yes. Or what's the old thing? A fly, a bazooka for a fly or something, where, yes, there's a fly in the room. I'm going to blow out this wall in order to swat it. If you have to reach for a cliffhanger in order to generate any kind of excitement or momentum, you have failed in the construction prior to the cliffhanger. Now, Ross over here asks a question about cliffhangers. Are cliffhangers required for a series of books? No, they're an available tool. They are an overused tool. They are deader than a dead horse level overused. They are beaten into the ground and well trod. But they can also be serviceable and functional. But if you are always reaching for a cliffhanger, if you're always 2 seconds away from, and then this happened, and then that happened, and oh, what's happening next? You're forever mashing the over and over while we wait to see what's going to happen. So we keep waiting and waiting. And the things never really feel resolved because, oh my God, there's another problem. Cliffhangers are nice, but they're not the only way to build tension. You don't always have to hook your book by leaving something undone, unless A, you're writing for children, because it's a really effective thing to grab a child's attention that way. B, you have very little consistent structure long-term in your book that you don't think your reader's going to be like, yeah, I'd read more about these characters. You don't need to manufacture an impending situation in order to keep the reader hooked, unless you aren't feeling very confident that you've hooked. Or you're taking the easy, lazy way out. You're thinking to yourself, gosh, if I just press this quick and easy emotional button and get the little pellet, then the rat that is my reader in the Skinner box will be satisfied and we'll keep moving forward. Your hook for your next book should be within that next book. even if you are serializing, right? Even if we're taking this big giant thing and stretching its arc over multiple stories, there should be enough in each story to be a contained instance unto itself, with the implication being, hey, there's going to be more coming down the road. You don't have to make that implication explicit. You can. It's not the end of the world if you do, but it's a very frequently rudimentary, frequently tired, frequently forced way to do it. For example, you and I are talking right now. We're just chatting. I'm having a day. You're probably having a day. And if this conversation goes well, you're going to want to come back to a different, maybe hypothetically, in a hypothetical world, I'm also streaming tomorrow. I'm not, but this is a hypothetical. Instead of me saying like, hey man, I'll see you later. It's good to see you. Come on back anytime, which are things I say. But instead, if I say, oh no, you have to come back tomorrow because tomorrow we're going to find out what's in, I don't have a box. We're going to find out what's in the box. I'm going to mime a box right now. Like, force an issue. You don't need that. If I really engaged you, if I was successful in holding your attention, if you liked what I'm saying, if it worked for you and explained things, you wouldn't need a hook. You'd be sold already. Don't go out of your way to manufacture a hook for a next book unless you're comfortable saying or expressing on some level, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm doing and I don't think anybody's going to like this. So I've manufactured this very uncomfortable situation in order to force you to come back. Please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please be my friend. Please like me. Please play with me on the playground. I'm totally good at Foursquare, you guys. If that's what you're down for, cool. Good for you. But all the same, you don't need to. Because if you close those loops effectively, meaning you resolve all the open-ended things you need to resolve, and you wrap up your story, and it's satisfying because you built sufficient tension, and you paid it off successfully, and you created opportunity, and you resolved it in a satisfying way, and your characters are different from their end state to their start state. They're not the same people they were when the book started, and the characters were sufficiently challenged, and the plot had more than like one step in it. Your reader should be engaged. If you're unsure if your reader is engaged after doing all those things, talk to a professional. Pay somebody. Get some like hardcore excoriating feedback. Do something about it. Don't just go, well, I know a cliffhanger works, so I'm going to use it. I mean, yeah, but again, we go back to our earlier metaphor. I need to clean my house, so I'm going to burn it down. That's a bridge too far. Don't do it. Side note, if you're watching this in whatever algorithmic moderation land is, I am not actually immolating my home. It's a metaphor. Use context clues. Cool? Cool. So how do you close those loops? Depends on what the loops are. But closing them effectively will ensure you not needing a hook. Great question. On we go. Are there any questions from people in chat? Of which, oh my God, there's a lot of you. Hello. Hi. You can wave at the screen. It's totally fine. I'm just over here drinking some tea. Questions, anybody? Else we march on. Boldly and proudly. Assertively might be a good adverb for me today. I'm having a day, and we're gonna get through this together, comrades. Whew. Shall we move on? Off we go. It's really nice to have you guys here, by the way. I don't say that nearly enough. I am thankful and grateful for each and every single one of you, all the subscribers, all the followers. Thank you. You are a great reason to keep doing this, and I appreciate it. Even if you never leave a comment, even if you never say anything, even if you catch this like 5 times down the road, I'm always thankful. Here's a question. Any productivity tips for writers? I'm assuming you'd like some serious productivity tips and not like the tech bro crush it 10x your results productivity tips, because apparently if I really want to do well on the YouTube and social media in general. I'm supposed to tell you to outsource your shit to AI, and that'll totally help you like crush it, bro. But since that makes my flesh crawl, I'm going to instead give you a few simple productivity tips as follows. 1, anything you do consistently doesn't need to always be done with the same level of investment. Writing 15 minutes a day, as frequently as possible, can net you better long-term results, albeit slower results, than trying to force writing once a week for 2 hours. Writing, really exercising any creative set of muscles or ideas, is about habituation. It's about crafting some kind of consistent usage so that your brain can build some neural pathways and fire some electricity and brain chemicals to get used to you doing a thing and being a thing in and around a set of routines. Some people anchor these routines to specific traits. They wear a particular bathrobe or a sweater. They have a particular cup of coffee. They sit in a specific spot. They go to a specific shop and get a specific food item. They find a way to materially trigger the conditions for creativity. Some people don't. For whatever reason, it doesn't automatically make you better or worse for doing it, but your productivity is not ever, or should not ever, be tied to some specific thing you do or some specific tool you use. Like, you're not going to be suddenly more productive if you suddenly switch to a different piece of software. That software might make a difference. That software might help in the long term, but ultimately the learning curve for changing your habit might also be a disadvantage, because now you've got to learn this piece of software and you're getting away from the thing you were intending to do. It's not about using the same thing as everybody else, because that's not going to get you the same results. Your results, your writing, come from the fact that you consistently do a thing. I know I'm harping on that. I'm going over it maybe far too much. But in order to be productive, you need to eliminate inconsistency. And I don't mean like do it every day or else. I mean like all those questions and issues that push and pull you away from writing, all the things where you get up in your head, all the things where you tell yourself it can wait, all those excuses, all that fear, all that resistance and hesitation. You have to reach a point in yourself where you are willing to put some degree of that away. I don't know if you can put all of it away. If you can, please let me know your secrets, because I've never been able to put 100% of it away and be sober. But I can tell you that if you can put some of it away and just say, hey, you know what? I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I'm still going to do it because I enjoy doing it. You will be happier with your result. I think too frequently we disconnect happiness from productivity and look at productivity in terms of capitalism and commodification. I'm this much closer to finishing my book. When I'm done my book, I'm going to be published and I'm going to sell my book. And product, capital. As opposed to, I work on my book when it's possible for me and I enjoy doing it. And yeah, it might take me a little longer because my day is more stressful, or I have other concerns or other issues that have to come first ahead of my writing, and I'm not in a position where I have the flexibility I used to or the time I used to. But all the same, don't tie your productivity to some end goal. Tie it to the expression of art you're making. Sit down when you can, for as long as you're comfortable sitting down, and produce the best you can at the time. And do your best to not judge it. Don't weigh what you wrote on Tuesday against what you wrote on Monday. Don't say, oh, well, it's been 3 months since I sat down and did it. It's not important how long the gap is. It matters that you came back. Don't try and chase other people's productivity methods. Find what works for you and do that until it doesn't work anymore, because sometimes productivity shifts because people mature or change or circumstances change. When things shift like that, adapt. Take time, figure out what's different, figure out what's out of place, and then do something about it. That is the best set of productivity tips I could give without getting like hyper specific to exactly what it is you're doing. And I don't mean to call you out specifically. That's not what I mean. I just mean in general, at that point, productivity becomes specific to the person. But the biggest hurdle, the big obstacle for everybody, whether we like to talk about it or not, is whether or not we get up in our heads. Because once we start getting bottlenecked there, because I don't know if you know this, but that's where your brain is. But once you get bottlenecked there, production slows everywhere else. Do what you can as best you can, as frequently as you can, not out of force or demand, but interest. And you'll surprise yourself with how productive you can be. Yes, productivity is hard when there's a cat parked on your keyboard. I know. I have no good solution other than, well, no, that's not true. I have a solution. This is ridiculous. If you have an old keyboard, like, I don't know, a beater, some like junky crap thing you can even like grab one second or third hand. Just put an old keyboard on the desk. It sometimes works. Because I've tried typing, petting cat with one hand, typing with another, and it doesn't ever go well for either of us. So navigating the cat situation, I think, might be the great productivity mystery not enough of us are talking about. Good stuff. Let's march on and see what else we have on our pile of questions. Question number 4. Is it impossible? Ooh, I love that. Is it impossible to end a third act with an action beat? Huh. All right, to be fair, I never really thought about this. You could totally end your third act, the end of your book, with an action beat. It doesn't necessarily need to be a cliffhanger. I can guarantee you the majority of people will see this and go, oh, a cliffhanger. But that doesn't make it a bad thing either. Is that what a cliffhanger is? A cliffhanger, Troy. Hi, by the way, it's good to see you. A cliffhanger is an unfinished, usually it's an action beat. It could be any kind of beat. It's an unfinished thing that needs resolution. What a cliffhanger does is try and create a sustained amount of tension. So it comes from the idea that your hero is literally hanging at the edge of the cliff, and we have to tune in next time, same bat time, same bat channel, to find out how Batman gets away from this. It comes from the old, like, serialized cowboy fiction days. Sometimes it's an action beat. A lot of the times it's an action beat because those are most visually engaging for visual media. But it could also be like a conversation. I have a terrible secret to tell you. And then the book ends, and then we move on. That's an action beat. It's a dialogue beat. It's a conversation. It's not impossible. Well, you can do it in either. You can do it in a 3-act story or a 5-act story, because 5 acts is just 3 acts that you subdivide. It's the same thing. It's the same function. You can always end anything with an action beat. It just depends on what you're trying to attempt via the action beat. Make sense? I'm sorry, I got distracted by somebody sending in a question I'm going to answer in like 2 seconds. So, yeah, you can end whatever act you want with an action beat. Be totally fine. 5 just so we're clear, 5-act is very common in television, and generally you want to end your 5-act in an action beat if you're looking to create a 2-parter or a forced cliffhanger to carry us forward. You don't. It's not done because it's bad. It's not done because usually there's an expectation of more resolution. We want more satisfaction. We don't want to keep waiting and waiting. Oh, I got to keep turning. I got to get the next book before it ends. There's only so long you can stretch things out before it breaks, whether we're talking about a piece of, bubble gum or taffy or a rubber band. It's only got so much give in it before it snaps. The reader only has so much tension they can maintain in their brain and in their guts before they're just like, screw this, it's taking too long. While it's not bad to play with that space every once in a while, don't always try to constantly stretch it. It's sort of like, when you're you're younger, you're in your teens, your early teens, and you are like sort of considering and finding out the boundaries of things. Like you just get into music and you just get your first stereo and all your music is played at like master blaster volume level. How high can I crank this knob while the windows shake, like the bass in your car, or like everything vibrates and you can't hear anything else? Like you can do that for a while until it gives you some kind of, hearing damage, or until somebody pounds on your door and says, hey, turn that down. You can't always do that, though. After a while, you got to wind it down. So you don't always look to manufacture maximum tension all the time. But you can absolutely end your third act with an action beat anytime. Anytime. Good question. On we go. Question number 5, a business question. Should I tie giveaways to my social growth? Does that help me? What this is asking about, and what this is, you see this in a lot of newsletters. You see this in a lot of small communities where, you're saying something like, I'm trying to get X number of followers on this platform or that platform. When I get to X number of followers on this platform or that platform, I'm going to give away something. Usually it's a book, or usually it's a piece of material that is maybe not otherwise available to create some level of exclusivity. And at its face, it sounds okay. Oh, the 1,000th person who signs up will get this exclusive thing. They'll get this exclusive pen that I used to write the first draft of the book, or whatever. That's great if you're the 1,000th person. It's not great at all for the person who's in position 847, because they're not going to get anything. Yes, they are making it possible for someone else to win, but there's no guarantee that based on the strength of, oh shit, I could win a pen, that they're going to stick around, and it's foolish to think so. There's nothing wrong with giving stuff away when you hit certain milestones. But don't challenge your audience who has no interest, no material need or vested interest in growing for you. Like, don't just sit back and go, hey, you guys, hey, if I get 1,000 people, I'll give away a whole box of pens. And then don't do anything and leave it to them to do the work for you. That's weird and parasocial and kind of unhealthy. So no, not that. But you can do it. It's not, if you got stuff to give away, give it away. Like the Chili Peppers said, give it away now. But by and large, does it help you? Well, ultimately, depending on what your goal is and what you're giving away, you'll reach that goal and have to give something away. So that'll be nice. But just as easily as they signed up, they can also unsubscribe. What are you doing to retain them? Yes, the offer of the magic pen got them in the door. How are you keeping them in the door? That's the better question. What are you doing? So, should you? I'm not a fan of should questions. Could I? Yep, you totally could. Let me know how that goes for you. But does it help you? Depends on how you're defining help. In the short term, sure, number goes up. Everybody feels better when number goes up. But ultimately, you got to keep them once they're there, because they'll leave. Because how many newsletters can we get into our inboxes? How many can we really sit and commit to? Don't, just as a side note, it's not required, right? This, come here. This isn't like a thing just because everybody else is doing it. You don't have to do it too. I know it's really popular, and I know lots of people really have very active, rabid levels of engagement with people, and you're going to feel maybe like you should have that too if you're going to be taken seriously because you want to be just as good as somebody else. I get that. I hear you. I understand. But if you're not providing more than that level of value, and I know I'm using some really shitty productivity tech bro, crush it bro terms, so I'm going to try and do this without some of that jargon. When somebody signs up for your thing, whether it's a newsletter or a community or a Patreon or who knows what, they have an expectation that they're exchanging something. Maybe that's $2 a month. Maybe that's $5 a month. Maybe it's their email address. They have an expectation that you're going to give them something worth more than the thing they're giving you. It has to matter more to them. It's a bigger deal. It can't just be the promise of a pen one day. It's going to be exclusive access to such and such and so, or a discount or advanced warning or extra material. That you have to give them something that they feel is worth it. And when you do, they stick around. When you exceed what they perceive to be worth it. If you go out of your way to give them definitely more bang for their buck, so to speak, they will not only stick around, but they will encourage others to come in. If you put all those hopes on giving them a pen, that's not necessarily the greatest relationship, because once somebody gets the pen, what is person 847 supposed to do? I didn't get the pen. Why should I care? That's the thing you have to grapple with on your own. I know other people do it. I know they have all different kinds of stuff and ways to do it. You don't have to do the same thing everybody else is doing. Yes, it's super nice to have all these big numbers. Oh my God, I have all these followers. I do all these things. I engage with all this stuff. That's great. Good for you. But why are you doing it? The assumption that, oh my God, I have 1,000 new followers. I don't know if every single one of them is going to make a sale. I don't know if they're all going to convert. Statistically, they don't. And it's not like 900 of them will. No, it's more like out of 1,000 people, 70, 80 maybe 100, but over time. So yeah, you're arguably increasing some amount of conversion, but it's negligible. It's not a totally 100% thing, because a lot of the world is going to be very passive to stuff. That's not because your pen sucks. That's just because how people are conditioned to be. So will this help you? Will this give you something to think about? Will this give you something to consider? I don't know. But if you're comfortable doing this and you want to do this because you want to see where it goes, go for it. Make yourself happy. Do the best you can. But don't hang your entire hat on this. Don't make this the be-all, end-all of everything, okay? Give it a try. Let me know. We can talk more about it next time. Great question. Love this question. What's next? I'm a short story author. How do I possibly build a newsletter? Oh man, we're doing business stuff left, right, and center. Here you go. Here is how you build a newsletter. You talk about your stuff, whatever your stuff is. You talk about what it was like to produce the thing. Because you remember, some portion of your audience is interested in the availability of your finished product. They signed up because they want stuff. That's inescapable, because commodification requires consumption. No way around it, right? But there's going to be some percentage of the audience who's looking for inspiration. They're looking for access. They're looking for permission. They're looking for encouragement. They're looking for methodology to do something similar to what you're doing, particularly in writing spaces. There's a lot of people who sign up for writing newsletters, not only because, hey, I'd like some free stuff, but also because I'm a writer too, and I read this newsletter so that when, if maybe this person will talk about a problem I'm having and they'll give me something that will help, and that way I won't feel my problem anymore. So you've got to juggle in this newsletter these possible wants of your audience. Now, this is a guess. Part of this is a guess. There's not necessarily always like hard and fast data. Nobody's standing at the foot of an escalator at the mall collecting all your service data. I mean, you can make some Google forms and ask, but by and large, if you're trying to get a newsletter off the ground as a short story author, you have to play with the tune that brought you. You got to come up with the material about your short story. You could offer in your newsletter, depending on how short your short story is, you could offer a free short story in your newsletter. Nothing wrong with that. But if in terms of it just being a newsletter where you write like, yep, wrote a short story, okay, bye, that's not much of a newsletter. That's not much of a conversation starter. That's more like a billboard. Newsletters don't necessarily need to and probably shouldn't function as a billboard, because that's what very static ads are for. Newsletters are community foundations. They're supportive things to tether people together. So build your newsletter around what it's like to be a short story author, the good, the bad, the ugly, the messy, and everything in between. And maybe that won't be for everybody because they have expectations that you're only going to come at stuff in a finished, polished way, and you're going to, zip your hoodie up and speak in very formal tones. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But they're going to have some expectations that you can't meet because you can't make everybody happy. That's not because you're bad. It's not because you're wrong. It's because there's a lot of people. And individually knowing what's going to make them joyful and satisfied with life is very difficult, nigh impossible. So rather than try and make all your people happy, make yourself happy first and understand that when you move and act and come from that position, whatever you're creating and whatever you're doing is going to connect with some portion of your readership. And over time, given your marketing, given the fact that you make this stuff available, other people who are looking for that percentage of stuff will stick around, and those people who are looking for something else will opt out. Such is the nature of community growth. So you build a newsletter the same way everybody else does. Talk about what's strongest. The writing, your goal, the plan, why on earth you're doing this, what you're hoping to get out of it. Not in this, oh, woe is me, it's so hard to get another person, but more in the sense of like, this is my journey. Come along with me on this path. Let's see where it goes. Why not do it that way? That's how you build a newsletter as a short story author. It's a tough road, whether you're writing short stories, long form fiction, or anything else, but it is valuable because one of the critical things we're all looking for is to not feel alone. And newsletters and audience development are a way we can not feel alone when we engage with this stuff. It's super valuable. It's worth your time. Try it. Really, just give it a try. Great question. Are there any other questions from anybody here? I see we have even more people here. Hello. It's nice to see you. Questions, anyone, as I continue to plow through hydration? Yes? No? It's all right. We can keep moving. Totally fine. I got 2 more pint glasses of water to go through. Let's do it. Shall we move on? What's the most annoying problem you have to deal with regularly when helping a client? Ooh, that regularly is a nice modifier. I like that. Okay. The most annoying problem I deal with regularly? Let me give you 2. And that's not because the world is full of annoying things, but because there are 2 things that most frequently annoy me. One is structural, and that's just a glut of commas. People throw commas around like they're leaving potato chip crumbs all over the place. Like everywhere. Put a comma, just sprinkle that shit in there. Just comma, 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 like just all over the place, right? It's a practical comma chameleon field. That drives me nuts, primarily because it's a fixable problem and you very seldom need as many commas as you think you do. And sometimes you can do without and it's just fine. So one, from a structural perspective, yanking out excess commas is, I think it might be the reason why I have as many wrinkles as I do, as opposed to the hard living I did in my 20s and 30s. I think it's excess commas that led me to look like this. That's item number 1. Item number 2. And I usually give commas as my not serious. I'm going to blow off the question answer because it's lighter in tone and everybody goes, golly gee, I get it. It's really hard. But I want to give you something more substantial, something more to chew on. I deal with a lot of writers who want very badly to reach for a level of success and have a level of accomplishment. I want to be published by this person. I want to be repped by this pimp. I want to be published this way. I want to sell this many books. I want to write like this. I want to do it like that. And they have these big aspirations, and there's nothing wrong with big aspirations. That's fantastic. But they don't do the work, not even the amount of work, just the work necessary to get them there. They will tell me 1,000 times over, hey, I want to write like such and so, insert famous author here. And then when I lay out, okay, here's what you'd have to do. And it very rarely has anything to do with the number of hours per week written or the style in which they write, or the fact that they have a specific thing they do, or this ritual, or it has nothing to do with that. It comes down purely to, hey, this is how they organize stories. You have to do something similar. You won't necessarily get their same results, but you can follow roughly a blueprint and end up in sort of the ballpark. What's most annoying to me that I most encounter are the people who swear to me that it's super, super important to them that they do this. They can't wait to do it. They're mega excited to do it. And they're just like eager to do it. They want to do it. They've been dreaming about this and working on it forever. And when push comes to shove, because, okay, you've talked about it, now it's time to come do the work, they don't. And we end up kind of spinning our wheels a little bit until they realize that they, in fact, are good enough to do this work and have been this entire time. It's just that for whatever reason, they've let themselves get in their own way, and they've let the size and scale of their dream dictate how to achieve that, rather than saying to themselves, I want to do the best I can. I'd like to aim in this direction, but beyond that, the road is mine to drive. That's the most annoying thing for me, because I would much rather spend my time helping the person specifically. Here's what you specifically need to get out the door. Here's what you specifically need to accomplish this thing. Crunchy, granular, messy, emotional, whatever it might be. I want to give that to people. I want to help them do what they want to do. And if that means we got to spend 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, talking about, hey, you're good enough, just keep going, without ever getting to, all right, we should probably talk about your plot, then so be it. But I got to tell you, from a just doing the work sort of perspective, it's most annoying to know and feel and encounter people who will tell me how big a deal it is, but when it's time to do that work, they are absent. I can't do it for them. I mean, I suppose I could, but I have no interest in that because it's not my book. It's their book, and my job is to help them do that book. But if you don't show up and meet me halfway, this is not going to be the best use of either of our time, and your book is not going to end up to the degree that it should. Those are the annoying problems. Commas, and I don't know how to put it. It's not commitment, because they're certainly mentally committed. They certainly want the thing. I'm going to call it, instead of commitment, I'm going to call it activity. Let's call it activity. Those are the things that get me. Everything else, including commas and activity, it's all fixable, but you got to show up, and you got to be willing to get your hands dirty, and you got to be willing to admit, like, hey, I'm out of my depth. Help. And that's not from like, I got to break them down like some kind of weird punitive drill instructor kind of thing. It's not about that. It's more about the idea of, hey, you came to me because you wanted to do a thing. Doing this thing is going to maybe get messy, maybe feel difficult. Maybe you'll feel overwhelmed. Maybe you'll be scared. Maybe you'll find out that the thing you wanted isn't really the thing you wanted. You wanted this other part over here. And for some people, that's very scary, because for some people, not everybody, but for some people, they talk huge about wanting to be a writer. But when we come down to, okay, it's time to go be a writer, they don't really want to be a writer. And that's fine. You know, some people talk, I got to be published. And then when we lay out the map to do that, they don't want it. It's scary, and they're unwilling to face that. And that's fine. I'm sorry. You know, I would love to see them do it, because I think their books are very publishable. But it's the nature of this job. It's the nature of this art. Some people will paint the hell out of things and it'll be gorgeous, but when it's time to say, okay, it's time to go hang it on the wall, you get all different kinds of responses. Everything from, are you sure it's good enough, to, I don't want to mar my wall, to, what is somebody going to say? I don't know. Let's find out. That's a hard part of this job. It's a fun part of this job. I love watching people be creative. I love watching people have that experience. But at the same time, there are times where I just want to tell them, it's okay. You can fail, and we'll figure it out. And you can make all the mistakes you want, and we'll figure it out. And we'll tailor your plan. But you gotta stand up, and you gotta do your best. And it's okay to be scared, because I'll be scared with you. We'll show up. We're in this together. You're not alone. I see you. Just Do your best, but do your best. That got a little rantier than I thought, Troy. I hope that answer's okay. It's a good question. I liked it quite a bit. Anybody else? As I put still more water in my face. Troy's question has me thinking, I want so badly, when I meet a client for the first time, I want so badly, not even for that, when I first started, I wanted so badly for everybody to come back because I wanted the validation. I wanted to be able to tell myself, oh, I was good enough at my job because they came back a second time. So I must be good at this. It was about satisfying or resolving my own insecurity. And it was like that for a very long time. And every once in a while, if you catch me on a bad day, it still kind of can be. But at the same time now, older, having been doing this hundreds of times more than when I first started, now I want to solve their insecurity. And that's hard because a lot of people don't know what their insecurity is. They just know that they want to do this thing and they're not quite sure why they're stuck or why it's hard or why they're scared. But I want to get there. Let me roll in my sleeves up. Let's do it. In fact, I'm probably happier doing that than anything else in this world. Maybe napping. I like napping. But now I want people to come back, not because, oh my God, I'm good enough. I want them to come back because, hey, I got like 2 decades of tools. Chances are one of these damn screwdrivers is going to be the thing that helps you build the thing you want it to do. Just got to give it a try. That's what I look for. That's what I think about a lot. I've been thinking about that a lot today. What a great question. Love it so much. Anything else? Else we will march on to the back half of this thing. On we go. Thanks for being here. Question 7. Oh, question 7. I've been waiting for this one all day. Question 7. Any advice for silencing your inner critic? I love how vicious that sounds. That's hardcore. Any advice for silencing your inner critic that's getting in the way of a first draft? Yeah, come here. Come here. In here. Lean over here. Also, I want more light on my face. Look, your inner critic is going to be there the entire time because your inner critic is speaking of a fear or a doubt you have. And what you're trying to do, not always incorrectly, but what you usually end up trying to do is resolve that fear before you do a thing. I got to knock out this inner critic and then I'll be able to write. I get it. I understand that logic. That logic makes complete sense. However, that logic is still wrong. You don't knock the critic out first and then go do the thing. You knock the critic out by doing the thing. Because what that critical voice, what that doubt is saying is, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough. I just don't know. It's going to be a problem. Nobody's going to like this. And then you don't do the thing that they're not going to like, thus proving the critic right, so the critic persists. But if you sit down and you say, yep, I don't know if they're going to like this, but then you do the thing, good, bad, sucky, shitty, fucked up, perfect, angelic, divine, inspired, whatever the fuck it is. If you do the thing, there's less for the critic to be critical about because it's just, well, shit, I wrote it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do, critic? I wrote it. That for me, now maybe that's not going to work for you, but that for me has always been like one of two ways I deal with the inner critic, because I will tell you this, on a daily basis, I am paralyzed sometimes. Like today, like yesterday, possibly tomorrow, who knows? I get paralyzed by things. Oh God, I got to write this thing. I want to launch this new thing, right? I want to launch this writing program that's not like everybody else's writing program because I can't afford their setup. But I want to roll out a paid subscription newsletter, long text form of writing tools. I'm ready to do it. I have to finish a web page and figure out how to price it, and I can fucking start the next day. And I'm terrified. And my inner critic is at me like, John, you got to pay some bills. You are seconds away from losing everything every day. like it's bad. And I can't keep telling everybody on the internet that it's bad, because then they'll go away, because who wants to hear that it's bad all the time? And my inner critic feeds like a snowball rolling downhill, like the boulder chasing Indiana Jones. It just keeps moving and chasing and moving and chasing. And when I sit down right here, right in this spot to write this thing, I lock up, because, oh my God, it has to be perfect. It has to be this thing. It's got to be good enough to get somebody who's never met me before, never heard a thing I've said, be at least interested to pay. What do I have it priced at now? Like $25 a month, I think. It might be $30 a month. It's in the draft page on the website. I don't know. But like, that's it. You know, like, it's got to be good enough to get them. And I'm terrible at that. And I've always been told I'm terrible at marketing. And I've always been told this, and I've always been told that. And all that stuff ferments and soaks in my brain. But when I sit down to do it and I'm writing it and I'm like, oh, that's a really funny joke. Let's use that somewhere. Oh, well, that's really good. I like this graphic. I worked really hard on 2 hours on this thing. That's cool. I can't silence the critic, but I can give it a new thing to be cranky about. I can give it a new thing to be pissed about, because I just keep making things. Yep, I suck. This is awful. I'm still going to do it because it's got to get done, because the alternative is more of this, and I'm tired of this. I want to do better. So instead of trying to nuke the critic first and then in the vacuum left behind, fill it with work and tell yourself, hey, I got stuff done. It might not be good, but it's a first draft. It's a first draft. Everybody's first drafts are awful. And they change. That's why we do second drafts. And I can always change whatever I want, because I'm the guy who wrote it. I made this. It's mine. If I decide I want to suddenly make everything different, I can do that. I understand being scared. I understand being afraid. I understand wanting it to be good enough from the jump, maybe because it's easier that way, or because that will verify and validate that somehow I'm good enough to begin with. Because look, even my first drafts kick ass. The whole thing in a first draft that kicks ass, just so we're clear, is that you wrote it. First drafts are messy, incomplete, undercooked things by design. The whole point of a first draft is to finish it, because the real nuts and bolts of revision and development are second draft things. First draft is just get it out of your brain and get it onto the page. And if you're critical at that stage, the hardball assumption is to question whether or not you want to do it in the first place. A more sensitive, compassionate discussion can come in and around, what are you worried about? It's a first draft. Nobody's going to see it. Write whatever the hell you want. You can always go back and change it. We can logic at this critic, and that's fine. I don't have a better answer than that. I've sat here in this space talking, filling the sound. The best way I know to get rid of an inner critic is not sober. And I can't tell you to do that. I can tell you that when I wasn't sober, my inner critic was off. But I wasn't getting anything done. I just wasn't critical about it. But now, the best thing I can tell you about an inner critic is that if you keep feeding it work, things to be critical about, it turns out you end up being less critical. Mainly because you're busy. I hope that's okay. I hope that answer's all right. It's not perfect. It is the thing I struggle with the mostest. And I will always give you the most honest answer I can at the time you ask the question. Ask me tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But for now, give your critic work. And it's a first draft. Beating yourself up accomplishes so very little, and you're capable of so much better than that. I know you are. So do your best. It's not going to be perfect. Doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be. And everything's fixable. Good luck. Great question. Off we go. Man, what is it with everybody asking like deep questions? For me, it's not being good enough myself. The last sessions I felt lifeless. The story is there, but it doesn't sparkle. All right, hang on a minute. We're backing up. I'm actually backing up. Hang on, podcast people. I don't have a backup sound. We're just going to roll back here because I want to address this. Sometimes stories feel lifeless. Sometimes stories for the moment don't sparkle. Sometimes that sparkle gets applied like an Instagram filter after the photo gets taken. If it's lifeless, you are not always the cause for its lifelessness. I know that sounds weird because you're the person who manufactured it in the first place. But sometimes it's lifeless because the idea is lifeless. Sometimes you can make it the best it can and it doesn't sparkle. Sometimes you can't force sparkle, which is a sentence I've never said out loud before. I'm thinking. I know, I'm streaming and I'm thinking, how dare I? But if you're unhappy with it, do it again. Try again. Do you need a break? Do you need more water? Do you need a change of scenery for a minute? You can't force it to sparkle, and you can't expect everything to sparkle, because when everything sparkles, nothing really sparkles. Sometimes stuff's limp on the page, and revision can make it better. Reimagination, recontextualization can make it better. It's not always going to be, I was going to use an American sports metaphor. That's not going to work for you. It's not always going to be a 3-goal game shutout. Sometimes it's a draw. Sometimes it's, it's not a last minute. I don't know soccer. I don't know football terms. It's not a last minute on penalty kicks win. Sometimes it's just a slop in the rain. You're not at fault and you're not wrong if it doesn't sparkle. You're not at fault and you're not wrong if it's lifeless. Sometimes ideas are just there. We can always go back and zap them with Frankensteinian's monsters electricity. Does that make sense? We can always kick it in the ass later. There are plenty of tools for that. But it's not your fault. You're not wrong. Like you didn't do anything wrong. It's just that's how the idea is. We can fix it later. Get it down on the page. Off we go. Cool? Cool. All right, now we're going back to the other therapy question. Good grief, John. Woo. Question number 8. How do I draw the line between being happy with what I'm getting and going after more when it comes to sales or audience or traction? Okay. Ooh, we're going to call this, tonight's episode is a very therapeutic writer's chat. I don't know. I'm going to admit a great coaching issue. I don't know how to draw a line. I have boundary problems. I'm hypersensitive. I'm not perfect. If you're not happy with what you're getting and you decide you want more, which is a fine response to I'm not happy with what I'm getting. If you want more, go pursue more and do so ethically, do so soundly, do so materially. Greg, I see your question. I got you in 1 second. If you're drawing a line because you're pushing too hard, you're forcing it, and it's a matter of, well, I got to have, let's make up numbers. I got to have 20 because 20 is better than 10. If you don't genuinely want it, you're never going to be happy. If your number is, I want 100, and you're not doing enough to generate 100, like you're telling one person, you're barely talking about it, that's where you should be pushing yourself to go after more. If you are doing everything you can to the best of your ability before you reach some kind of point of incredible pain or dissatisfaction, that's where you draw that line to the best of my knowledge. But the best thing you can do if you're sort of on that fence between I should be content with what I have and give me more, is look at the reason you're telling yourself why you want more. And then sit down and figure out why you're answering that question that way. Are you saying you want more because you're feeling insecure? Greg, this is how I segue into your question. Are you saying that you want more because you're not feeling good enough compared to other writers? Or are you saying you want more because you like the feeling, the dopamine, the brain chemicals from getting more? If that's the case, which is fine if that's the case. We all like brain chemicals. They feel good. But your heart's not in it. Then you're going to be dissatisfied when more shows up, because you got to do enough to get more in the first place. It's sort of like saying, I totally want to make more dinner. I want to cook more things, but then you don't stretch the dough any thinner for your pizza. There's value in being content, but so many people interpret that as complacency. There's value in understanding when it's okay to push because you want to see if you're capable of it. There's very little value in chasing a number because you think that's where you're going to become legitimate. If you're seeking legitimacy, it's never going to be found in numbers. That legitimacy is the light at the end of the tunnel for self-satisfaction. I like what I do. I'm happy with it. That's where you're legit. Not what somebody tells you, not what sales say, not what numbers are, because those are very, very fluid things that change when the wind blows. If you're going after more because you want to see if you're capable of it, because the number itself doesn't matter, but the want is there, I think you'll be happier. I don't have a good answer for this question. I want to answer Greg's question because I'm assuming your name is Greg. I shouldn't do that. But I want to answer this question. How do I stop comparing myself to other writers? You, insert your name here, and I presume your name is Greg. You are the only writer who's going to write what you're writing the way you're writing it. Let's make something up. I don't know you, but let's make something up and say you're writing fantasy. You're writing a fantasy novel about a kingdom or something. Doesn't really matter. It's an example. You might look at all the other people writing fantasy novels about kingdoms, and you might say, gosh, theirs is better than mine because they have all the same components, but they're just better at it. That's not actually a thing. You can do this task of writing, whatever you're writing, in a way nobody else can. Yes, you're using all the same words and the same language and all the commas you want. But your view, your experience, your voice, your thinking is unique to you. When you feel that urge, that need, that drive to compare yourself to other people, what they're writing, how well they write, how fast they're writing, the success they have, the things they get, the deals, the money, the followers, the whatever. When you feel that pressure pushing in on you, when you feel that like, oh my God, I'm not good enoughness, when you feel that, I always tell people to come back to that point of why are you doing this and what about this activity makes you happiest? Because those are the things that no amount of numbers or pressure can take away from you. You are the only person who can do your story your way. Other people can write kingdoms. Other people can write fantasy or science fiction or weird stories about chickens or whatever the hell people write, right? It's all whatever. You're the only one who can do it your way. Comparing your way to their way is like comparing your unmade bread dough. I put two eggs and flour in a bowl, and how come it's not the same as this store-bought loaf of bread? Because they're totally different things. You're going to make bread, and it's going to be unlike anybody else's bread. That does not automatically mean it's bad. It just means that it's different. Different is not a synonym of bad. You do the best you can. You use all the tools you can. You do the best you can. You ask questions. You get help. You look for answers. You keep trying. Same journey everybody else is on. You're doing the same stuff. Yeah, you're going to get different results because you're different people. And you try different things, and you use different experience, and you bring different baggage along with you. And it's messy, and it's hard, and it's so easy in this to compare yourself to somebody else because we're looking at their end results, and we're looking at our current position, and it's like saying, I'm in the middle of this race, and they're finished. And look, they're celebrating at the end, and I'm still running, so I must not be good enough. When it's two different activities, you're still running, they're done running. That doesn't mean they're better than you because they're not competing with them. They're just done the activity that you're still doing. Go back to what makes you happy. Go back to why you're doing this. Go back to the thing that you do best that nobody else can do, which, by the way, if you're curious, is your story. And double down on the fact that you're doing your fucking best. And nobody can take that from you. And if you want to change what you're doing or how you're doing it, that's on you, and do that for your reasons. Don't do that because, 10 other people are going faster, better, longer, harder, stronger. Good for them. Have a cookie. Like, at the end of the day, we all make books. There's a bookshelf right over here. It's full of shit, full of books. That's up to them. At the end of the day, we're all left with manuscripts and questions, and we all get edits and notes and feedback and ratings and this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, we all make loaves of bread. Rather than worrying that your loaf doesn't measure to their loaf, find out what makes your loaf unique, even as hokey as you might think this advice to be. Find out what makes your loaf unique and celebrate the shit out of it. Because that's not what they're going to do. They're going to sit here and compare themselves and tear themselves apart. And if you want to get away from that and you want to get past that, focus on what you succeed at and what's good for you. Hey, my loaf isn't your loaf, but my loaf has X, Y, and Z things. And you will be much more satisfied in the long term. And then it's just a practice. It's just a regular habit. What an awesome question. Thank you so much for asking it. I really like that question. That's good. I wish I had a better question answer for 8. Maybe I'll end up doing that as a podcast because that's a chewier thing. I might end up doing that tomorrow as a podcast. On to question 9, a technical question. I have 2 characters who are basically the same character. For the record, it's a fantasy novel where we have 2 snarky comedic archers. I don't want to merge them into one character, which is the most common solution for doing this. How do I make them distinct but not redundant? I'm going to tell you right now, the answer to this is rewriting one of them. Doesn't matter which one. One of them is going to get rewritten. And how you rewrite them and what you change is what makes them distinct. Likely, you're going to want to make a substantial rewrite to one. Make him less snarky. Make him not an archer. Make him not a he. Whatever. But a substantial change is going to create distinction so that you're avoiding redundancy. Because if you're keeping 95% of the character the same, only now, yes, one's an archer, but one's an archer with a scar. It's not distinct enough, and you're going for distinct. So it's going to require a significant rewrite. It's going to require you to make a fundamental change to one of them. Not both of them, though that is an option, but that's a little bit too much work. Instead, just change the one somehow, some way, at the character's base. That's a lot easier than making a superficial decision. One has a beard and one doesn't. That's great, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't make the change radically different. You want to aim at the base of the character and figure out what they are at their core. Changing that's going to make each distinct and not redundant. Great technical question. Are there any other questions from people as I continue to pour water in my face? Other questions, issues, etc.? Shall we march on? On we go. Question 10. What are 3 common problems with main character arcs, and what are their solutions? I just want to say, you can totally ask this kind of question all the time. I would be happy to give you solutions to problems. Not enough people do that. But here we are. 3 common problems with character arcs and how to fix them. Problem number 1. The arc isn't really much of an arc, meaning character doesn't change significantly. Yes, maybe they lost their home. Maybe they fell in love with the love interest. Maybe they changed jobs. But at the core of who the character is, much like we talked about with the redundant characters in the previous question, much like the core of them hasn't changed between our 2 indistinct characters, if your main character hasn't undergone some kind of internal transformation, it's not much of a character arc. Oh, you change the superficial stuff. They have a new job. They drive a different car. Yeah, fine. Maybe they live in a different place or they make more money or but you still fairly have a superficial reason. They're still essentially the same person. So the arc doesn't change them enough. They don't change over enough time and space. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2. It wasn't very hard to do. You see this a lot with authors who have characters that they don't want to challenge. They don't want them to be in danger. Everything's super easy for the character. They don't have to work too hard. They don't have to struggle. They, there might be a problem, but all of a sudden they have a solution to a problem. Oh, they just cast a spell, or they turn into an elephant, or they, use mind powers, or they grab an item that they're perfectly suited for. A lack of challenge in an arc means that it's very hard for the reader to say, oh, I believe this. Because I don't know if you know this, but your readers are people. And in people's lives, things are hard. That doesn't mean you need to have like an exact one-to-one relationship translated so that what's hard for you is equally hard for your characters. Sometimes that's okay, but not always. But it comes down to the idea that, your character has to work a little bit. It's got to have some challenge to them, because that's what churns, that's what drives them forward. That's what churns them up to make them transform. If it were easy, they would have done it already, because they're so good at everything. You got to challenge your character, and they have to change who they are. That's why they're the first 2 biggest problems in character arcs. The third problem with the main character arc is that it's over too soon. You see this in character arcs that are underdeveloped. They change who they are, in the first, I'm going to make numbers up, don't hold me to them, but they change who they are in the first 10 chapters. And there's still 35 more chapters of the book, They're barely out of the first act and the character arc is done. Well, that doesn't seem like it was a very big deal. And a character arc, especially a main character arc, should persist for a long time in the story, because the reader is rooting for this character to transform. They're rooting for this character to win. They're rooting for the character to turn out okay. Oh man, how's our hero going to get through this situation? I got to keep reading to see what she's doing. If it's over too quickly, there's one fewer reason for the reader to stick around. How do you solve that? Well, plan more arc. Not so much stretch it out, but put more individual instances of it. Show the character in progress. Let's use a sports metaphor. Let's say you have a character who wants to get better at, playing basketball. In order to have them play basketball, you can't just have them go from a character who we see once in one scene not being able to shoot, and then all of a sudden put them in the championship game and they're draining buckets all over the place. That's unrealistic. That's not a great arc. But if you show them over the course of the story progressively getting better, because they're going to practice, they're training on their own, they're getting lucky and getting hot streaks inside games, they're shooting more often, more people are trusting them with the rock, so they're coming in and they're going to the post. Whatever it is they're doing, you have to show the transformation and the progress in that arc over the long term. The longer you can tie that arc, by the way, for your main character, that arc and the story's climax usually go hand in hand pretty easily and nicely. It's really nice. It's really not necessarily the best choice, but certainly a really good quality one to tie the character's arc in with the plot of the story. For example, to use our basketball metaphor, the character who's always struggled to make 3-point shots or foul shots suddenly gets the ball with 3 seconds on the clock and has a chance to either send the game into overtime or win the big championship game. And it comes down to them making one shot. And the reason they haven't made shots is because they haven't believed in themselves. And now here in this moment with the clock ticking and everybody staring and waiting breathless, they put the ball in the air and it goes up and we follow it and swish, it's in. And all of a sudden the character who didn't believe in themselves is now believing in themselves, and the thing they did just let them win. So they satisfied their arc and the plot in one action, in one tense scene. It fits together really nicely. That's a really great strategy for a lot of 3-arc structure. Take advantage of it. Use it. It works for a reason. On we go. Question 11, a publishing question. How are submission windows determined? If you don't know what this is, a submission window is the date, the range of dates that a particular publisher is accepting submissions, either from agents or individual people. Everybody sets their own. There are very common times. A lot of people do them in late January. A lot of people do them in mid-April. A lot of people do them in mid-September. And for some companies, this is very arbitrary. They do it when they feel like it. They do it when they need stuff to work on. But most of the time, the window is determined based on how long it takes them to make a book. So they say to themselves, we would like some books on sale for December, for the holiday season. We know it takes us X number of weeks or months to produce a book, to edit it, to get it revised, to get a cover, to get it laid out, to get it printed, to get it shipped. It takes X number of weeks or months, depending on any number of logistical details. So then they work backwards. We want our book. So they put literally, this is what happens. They put their finger on a calendar day and go, we want books available on this day. So let's count backwards days, weeks, and months until we get to, okay, at the we find this date 6 months, 8 months before. That's the last day we can accept a book, say yes, and immediately turn it around. So usually what happens is they say, I'm going to make some dates up, so don't hold me to this. If we want books available for sale on the 15th of December, and we know it takes 6 months, the absolute last day we could possibly do it is June 15th, 6 months earlier. But that means we get a book and say yes and turn it and start the process on the same day. That's not really feasible. We want to give ourselves a little bit more time to read submissions and things. So let's give ourselves 30 days prior to that. So instead of June 15, now we're in May 15. So May 15th is the last day of a submission window. So then we usually say to ourselves, okay, so if May 15th is the last day we can say yes to a book, how long do we want a submission window to be? We basically pull a number out of thin goddamn air and say, let's do submissions for 2 weeks, which is a fairly normal, but it's still a long period of submissions. You'll get a lot of them if you're taking unsolicited submissions. So you'd say, okay, so May 15th is our last day. Let's say May 1st. We look at a calendar and figure out what day of the week it is. But let's just say hypothetically, we say May 1st. So all of a sudden now our window is May 1st to May 15th. That's how the window is determined. It's worked backwards from the release day. Some people space that out and go, we want to have multiple submission windows. Multiple submission windows, just so we're clear, divide this labor up over time. We don't want to do all the books in May, so we break it up. We do some in January, we do some in May, and we do some in September. That way we have a constant stream. We don't all have only books in December. They spread it out over time. It's also worth pointing out that right now, let's see, what's today? 2023. Books for probably 2025 are in production. You're looking now, if you submit now, I would not be surprised if you get a release day in late 2025, maybe even 2026, because people tend to plan these things out long term. It's a businessy thing. I've never agreed with it. I don't like it, but that's how it seems to happen. Great question. On we go. Question number 12. What's a genre I expect to blow up in 2023? Water is so good. All right. So I'm thinking about this. I think, honestly, I'm pausing because I was about to say something off the top of my head, but I don't think that's right. I was going to tell you that second-person fantasy was the way to go. Oh my God, you guys, second person is going to make a comeback. Because it is, because it's being, there are several courses and classes through Kajabi and Thinkific that are going to come out that are going to extol the virtues of going off the beaten path. I don't know if they're any good. I don't know if they're going to happen, but I know they're on the radar for some people. However, if we're going with kind of like not my snap judgment, I really and truly think that instead of urban fantasy being big again, I think we're going to see more modern fantasy, which is to say the amalgamation of modern contemporary life for us right now, all of this, with some fantasy sprinkled in. Like you'll go get a cheeseburger tomorrow at a drive-through and a gnome will hand it to you. That kind of thing. I think that's due for a big push because people are looking for a better blend of reality with fantasy. And I don't mean like magical realism, although that's a thing. But I mean more like the idea of I'm taking fantasy tropes and I'm applying them to our modern life. Wouldn't it be interesting if we all had to deal with like actual trolls who trolled on the internet? I think that's something worth exploring. I think that's going to be it was very popular in like many moons ago in the 1980s and 1990s. And I think it's going to resurge. I really do. If you're out there writing this, by the way, good job. You're on what I expect to be the cusp of a wave. Let's go do that 13th question. Question 13, a business question. How do I transition readers from one series under one pen name to another series under another pen name? Well, I hate to tell you this, but we got to pull the curtain back in order to do it. You have to reveal or create some kind of plausible connection between the pen names. You know, sometimes you have to say, hey, I was writing under X. Now I'm going to go write under Y. It helps to pull the curtain back. It does not destroy the illusion because the illusion's pretty much artificial at this point. But it can be useful and helpful to consider that if you want to steer people from one to the other because you're wrapping one up and moving things forward, not all of them are going to come with you. Just like when you use not a pen name and you start one series and then you say, hey, I'm going to make a new one. Not everybody ports over because maybe the other series is in a different genre or it's got different characters or it just doesn't feel the same. We are all right this second, I'm sure, thinking about an author who did something different in a different set of books and they didn't stick around. But you transition those readers by preparing them in some way, shape, or form, say through a newsletter to say, hey, you know, I'm producing a book now under this series. You can sign up for it here. It's available here. Get ready. And then functionally treat it as though you're starting over. You don't want to necessarily assume you're going to get zero transmission of people. It's not like nobody's going to follow you. You'll get some following from it, but expect to have to grow again. Now, maybe you'll exceed in the second pen name in the second series. I don't know. Depends on what it is. But don't expect it to be just the same. Yes, there's going to be fall off. There's going to be some people who are like, nope, I came in for one series. That's done. Okay, I'm out. And that's fine. That's totally okay. But you can ease new people or people on the fence in and then grow that new series the same way you grew the first one. High production, honesty, regular communication, accessibility, over and over and over, consistency, boom, bang, zoom, you grow again. That's how you do it. I believe you have to reveal how the sausage gets made on this stuff because I think it's maybe a little arrogant, maybe a little pretentious, I guess would be the word, to sit and be like, oh no, I know I write under X, but you'll never know the real me. I now write under Y. Like, I just think that's a waste of time and energy. So rather than try and create new elaborate artifices to disguise yourself, I think you'll get a better quality response by just saying, hey, this is me. I used to write under that pen name. Now I'm over here with this stuff. Enjoy. Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm projecting. I don't know. But I know that not everybody's going to follow. And you got to be okay with that. But you can do it, I think, by an honest replacement of, hey, I used to do this, now I do that. Newsletter, something longer than a tweet. You know, something where you can give people an explanation or a context at the very least. Not that you have to justify why you're doing it, but you should at least make it clearer than going, hey, now I'm writing under a new thing, bye. You know, try and give them something to chew on. All right? Great questions. Great stuff. Are there any other questions or anything tonight? Anything from anybody? Else we will go to the outro. There is a plane. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear it on the microphone, but it seems like there's a plane maybe like 10 feet from the roof. It's crazy. What are some subtle ways to highlight how your protagonist and antagonist mirror each other ideologically? Ooh, what a lovely question. Okay, let's do this. First of all, you're going to need to make sure that each of your protagonist and antagonist in question have an ideology. And you're going to need to make sure that they both not only have one, but share the same one. And then come up with a list of all the reasons why those characters share that ideology. Don't do it simultaneously. Do one, then do the other. And then look for overlap. So for instance, let's say both your protagonist and your antagonist in your story both believe in, I got to think of a really absurd example to illustrate this. Let's suppose your protagonist and antagonist both believe in the profound quality that is capitalism. They really think that, oh boy, howdy, liberal centrist democracy and capitalism and neoliberal politics are just the bee's knees. The protagonist thinks that it's the best way to get honest consensus in a group through neoliberal centrist democracy. And the antagonist knows that it's the best way to gain personal capitalist interest. So how do they mirror each other subtly? Well, they're both interested. You have these lists and you look for overlap, and then you boil that overlap down to a more central point. So the protagonist thinks that it's the best way to get consensus to get everybody on board with doing a thing, and the antagonist thinks it's the best way to get consensus to do specifically what he wants. So you have them mirror each other in an action that illustrates their perspective on the ideology. The capitalist is rallying the goons and the trolls to harass people, but the good guy is knocking on doors to inform the citizenry that some event is happening. They're doing the same action, but they're doing it for different reasons. Likewise, you can have them use the same reason, but have two different actions. So the capitalist, for instance, is spending advertising dollars. They are promoting, let's come up with some capitalist bullshit. Clean coal, because I saw that commercial on TV today. Clean coal. The idea that coal can be clean for some reason, somehow, if we just, brush it a lot. The capitalist is promoting clean coal, and so they're using ads to talk about clean coal, whereas your protagonist is going door to door with a piece of coal, explaining how you can't just brush the badness away because it's coal. So you don't necessarily have to have them do the same actions, but have them do the same intent to inform the people about coal. So two tools. Mirror their actions for the same reason, or mirror their reasons despite actions. The subtlety or opacity of their actions, I leave that to you specifically for your word choice. But it comes down to, what is each character trying to accomplish? Why are they trying to accomplish it? Why do they share the view they share? That's how you get them to mirror each other. Planning. Great question. Anything else? Really great question. Shall we go to the outro? Let's do it. Let's go to the outro. Thank you to each and every single person who is here tonight. Thank you so much for a chance to talk about all the things. I'm sorry I didn't have great, brilliant, scathing, spicy answers to some stuff. Thanks for letting me be honest. Thanks for letting me just sort these thoughts out as I have them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your continued support. If you do want to support this, other than liking and subscribing and clicking the bell or following as appropriate, jump over to patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouWriteBetter. $2 a month changes everything for me, for you, for everybody involved. It also gives you a chance to see what's coming up next, not only for this channel, but for everything else I'm doing. And I genuinely and sincerely appreciate every single cheer. Thank you for the bits, every single sub, every single question, everything. It means the world to me, truly, to be able to do this every week. And I am a lucky, lucky man that I get to spend my time helping people. All power to all people. Thank you so much for everything. The next time I'm here, I don't know if there's going to be a Monday stream yet on the 13th. Stay tuned to the newsletter for that. By the way, if you want to get on the newsletter, it's johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com, and you click the newsletter pop up. But I know I will be right back here for the chat on Wednesday the 15th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, until the next time we speak, please take care of yourselves. Know that I love you, and I will talk to you guys very, very soon. See ya.